Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, we shall proceed, and the other two speakers are going to join us a bit later. Welcome and thank you very much for all joining. My name is Dr. Kenny Tenza, and I am the Executive Manager for Business Development and Commercialization for a division of the CSIR called Advanced Chemistry and Life Sciences. And I'm going to be chair of your session this morning. So the title of our topic this morning is Harnessing Research, Development, and Innovation for Modernization of Agriculture. I have a lineup of 3 speakers who are going to briefly give us presentations. So what we're going to do is we'll allow each one of them to give us the presentation, and thereafter we will open the floor for questions for all the 3 speakers. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any waste of time, I would like to introduce the first speaker for the morning, Mr. Marius Boshoff. Mr. Marius Boshoff is an experienced executive in the agriculture industry, skilled in food value chain management, agro-processing, farming, biotechnology, and field research in agronomy and horticulture fields. He holds an MSc, master's degree, that is, in agriculture, specializing in plant pathology from University of Pretoria. He currently leads the strategic direction for WinField United, South Africa. His career spans over 30 years in various roles in the farming and crop protection industry. His previous roles include country manager for Southern Africa, project lead for Africa, Middle East, and Turkey, sales and marketing leader at DuPont, Southern Africa, crop specialist, food chain and development manager at Syngenta, South Africa, field trialist, farm management and nursery management at the Mirinsky Foundation, one of the largest fruit and forestry companies in South Africa. Additionally, ladies and gentlemen, he is a certified Six Sigma Black Belt, sales and marketing and qualified quality management specialist. He has significant experience in project management across Africa, the Middle East, and Turkey, in crop protection industry in South Africa. He has been an active executive committee member of the industry body of Crop Life. He has also served as vice president, that is for 2 terms, and president, and leading the restructuring process of the organization to align the future of farming needs. Lastly, his passion lies in the technical marketing and analytical problem solving in agriculture, and he has a successful track record in product and business project development. He subscribes to the view that without data, all you have is an opinion. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Marius Boshoff. How long is it? 20? Say 15?
15.
If you can.
Thank you.
Thanks. So that's the pointer.
Pointer and
Back.
Thank you, Doctor. Yeah, I enjoy it when people laugh at the black belt, right? But it's a statistical term, by the way. But 30 years ago, I actually started my career as a young intern at Division of Food Tech here at the CSIR. So quite nice to be back, and thank you very much for inviting me and participating in this talk. So I'm using a theme of a recent conference that I attended and we hosted as a company down in the Cape and it deals with climate smart agriculture. And I'm going to get back to the theme. And so when Oba King, who invited me to the meeting, asked me the title, I think I immediately went into the scientific view of it. Let's talk integrated crop management. Let's go IPM and so on. And then in retrospect, I decided to just sort of, I could have made it broadly, but I think I'm going to come back to that again because I think it's a process. We need to be able to understand how agriculture and how farmers view technology and what we as industry and business can bring to farmers globally. Right, so I don't know for those of you who are aware that back in 2020 was the International Year for General Plant Health Awareness, right? I don't know who attended some of the webinars because most of us couldn't travel. But essentially during that year, I think the awareness it just didn't feel like we were getting the message across to consumers out there. But I think we all know that plants are vital to life. It's food we eat, it's the oxygen we breathe. And we know that these sort of collaboration and innovation drives one thing, but it has to be in the context of good agricultural practices. And good agricultural practices can be defined within the context of a changing climate. It's no longer coming, it is there. We need to consider it under the resource, and I want to go really broad in defining resource. And then lastly, we have to understand that the value it brings to our communities. And I think integrated crop, integrated plant health management has to keep all of these factors as part of the management of a good, functional, productive farming unit. So even before the pandemic, we were struggling with the three main challenges in the agricultural industry and the food system for that matter. And it's not new, it's been there for decades. How many times have you attended a conference with someone saying, you know, by 2020 or 2050, we have to feed 10 billion people? And I don't know how. Sorry. But if we consider the world today, the UNEP published a report in 2019 that said that we have 930 million tons of food waste in the world. And today we have more than 800 people going acutely hungry, not a guaranteed meal every day of their lives. So before we talk about 10 billion people, let's try and see if we can feed the 800 or billion hungry people currently in the world, and also addressing the food wastage. Because it's so much more than just producing quality nutritional food. It's more than that. It's really about the systems, the logistics, the infrastructure. And the saying that goes is that you can't have good projects in a bad policy environment. And I'd like to expand on that in saying that you can't have good projects in a bad infrastructure environment. Recently, we had the strikes at the Durban Harbour. Do you know the impact that had on the farming community in terms of fertilizer, crop chemicals, input that needs to go into the fields right now? And I think it's important to keep those things in mind, that these are big challenges that we are facing. And then we need to understand that agriculture has a huge carbon footprint. It does. It is inherent the way it functions. It's not a circular system. Even if we believe in regenerative farming, you ultimately extract something from every piece of hectare in order to feed it and transport it somewhere else. So we need to consider these challenges are remaining. But more recently, the impacts that the world has seen is if we consider, and I'm just going to skip through them all, and just gain us some time in the presentation as well. But globally, I mean, we all know climate change, and I'm not a climatologist, but we understand that climate is one of those variables the farmer cannot significantly control. But it will have one of the most existential threats in agriculture in our country going forward. And we already see some of these things. As we stand here today, the rains have started falling in the northern parts of the country. 2.5 million hectares of corn or maize will have to be planted if there are openings within the next 3 to 4 weeks. After that, it becomes risky. So a lot of work that has to go in this month in terms of getting the crops into the field. And climate can limit the windows of opportunity, especially in our row crop industry. Leaner, greener, cleaner, that's the theme of the day. We need to understand that we need to be regenerative in our approach. Health imperatives. I mean, I don't need to tell you just the 2-3 years that we've gone through and how we had to deal with that and how it impacted our systems, and till this day, how the supply systems globally has been disrupted. And so we're all struggling with that. The whole geopolitical shifts that we're experiencing, Ukraine, Russia, these are all having huge impacts globally in the world. It has shot up inflation in the developed world higher than what we are used to in South Africa. And I think those are really impacting the global food system massively. Things are going digital. We know that, and we've heard it during the plenary session again. The value that potential the fourth industrial revolution can bring to us. The use of data and really getting into the AI space where we can become predictive. As an agronomist, I can tell you agronomy loves to be reactive. Farmer has a problem, you go to the farm, you solve the problem, you go away. The world is moving to a predictive state. We need to be able to predict more accurately in field during the course of the seasons. So it may, and then last but not least, how does it impact our communities in agriculture? You know, what is our people view on agriculture? So this brings me to the integrated crop management, which I can see a lot of people enjoy the terminology. The focus is really on integrated. So back in 1997, some of the first global agricultural practices were third-party audit through the implementation of Europe GAP on export fruit farms mostly. And today, every farm that exports either fruit or has a local supply agreement with retail locally will have to have at least one or other internal audit or an audit on good practices on the farm. And I'm going to say this, it's a process, it's not a plan. So you have to consider every aspect of the farm in order to really think about how do you bring this together. And that is the toughest job on the world. It's a farmer who has to implement all of that and consider the impact of that. I sometimes wonder why all businesses are not audited third party on things like these, but our farmers are. Going into my field of speciality, it's really my flagship slide. So if you want to remember anything, this would be the slide to take a picture of. So integrated pest management is defined as everything that you can do in order to be preventive, right? So the first step in the cycle is everything that is good practice that prevents plant health decline. And there's a whole list of them. In fact, this list could probably expand much more than that. But as we go through this process, the observation part of it, the monitoring, the understanding what is happening in field near real time becomes very important. Observation. Coming to intervention, no pun intended, intervention after observing and really trying to understand how you should intervene really then starts looking at the options and the technologies that's available to you. Now, myself coming from the crop protection industry, you know, if you have false codling moth or if you have black spot, you don't want to play with this disease, right? You don't want to think maybe we're going to do something that might control it or you nuke it, right? That's what you do. And that's how we've learned over many years how to manage really critical diseases, phytosanitary diseases, pests, false codling moth of citrus, codling moth of apples and pome fruit, scale of various of our fruits. And we've got to consider all of these within the context, again, of this process called integrated pest management. So integrated crop management that obviously leads into integrated pest management. But we live in a strange world. And coming back to what I said was that Edward Deming termed the phrase, said, without quality data, all you have is an opinion. Nowadays, consumers tell us, well, without an opinion, all you have is data. And it frustrates the living daylights out of scientists because it must be a cause and effect situation. And the world feels that there's a whole conspiracy going on in terms of our food production, GMOs, CRISPR technology. Think about everything that we have available to improve plant health, to improve nutrition, to improve yields on farms, to combat climate change and really create resilient systems. And yet the consumers say, we don't feel that it's right. And I think this is something we have to be aware of. You cannot fight, and as scientists, we need to be able to communicate more clearly about what we want to achieve. So the sustainability imperative then becomes, we need to create this breach between degenerative practices that's still ongoing today and regenerative practices. And I'm sure a lot of you have read or understand the whole concept around it, but essentially moving away from the bad habits into the good habits and really improving soil, enhancing the environment, creating a resilient environment that can really support that very important process called photosynthesis. And once we've done that, we can really improve the whole future of regenerative agricultural practices. But I want to show you what happens if you do not get the balance right. If you overnight want to implement something that has driven one nation to the brink of total implosion. And I have a good case study on this, right? So Sri Lanka, back in 2022, the government really decided that, look, they're going to implement literally overnight, and go into everything must be organic. So they banned the importation of fertilizers, and they banned pesticides, literally from one season to the next. And it had a huge impact. But generally speaking, I mean, there was unrest. Obviously, one can expect that when people don't have food and they don't have access to anything, can't buy medicine, generally a situation of implosion and total unrest situation. And they were contributing factors, all of the usual. The pandemic played a role. There were loans that were outstanding. The Chinese has built a lot of infrastructure. And they really had to relook at how we did that. How did they address this? So the declining growth started already back in 2012. And obviously, these had huge impacts on inflationary roles that it played. Does it sound familiar, by the way? Okay, so I think it's important to consider this. But the huge underlying factor here was the Western green elites that was really pushing the organic agenda through the new terminology, is ESG, environment, social, and governance. And it really looks at emissions. And we've heard these sort of the funding that's available to go green. But I think in this context, one of the biggest steps they did was, well, let's green, let's go organic. So immediately the government imposed that legislation, and overnight that whole agricultural system collapsed. So 1/3 of the farmlands went literally dormant in 2021. 80% of those farmers used to use their chemical fertilizers. And they banned, when they were banned, about 85% of those led to crop losses. So just some numbers. Essentially 20% production fell in rice production. Prices skyrocketed. They had to import more than 450 million rands worth of rice, despite having been self-sufficient previously. And they had about 2 million farms. And remember, about 15 million of those farms, essentially out of the country of about 22 million people, were farmers. They were directly involved in farming. And so that led to a total implosion. So it's a direct link to what they decided to ban the products, chemical fertilizers and crop protection. The irony of the story is that Sri Lanka had a near perfect ESG rating of about score of about 98. So they were very green, but they were essentially bankrupt. And they even beat Sweden and the United States in terms of the approach to it. So I think this is the unbalanced approach. This is what can happen if you want to force a certain idea on people and saying, well, the future must be regenerative, you know? So translate that into organic. And we're not saying that organic is bad. We are saying there are aspects that can be integrated into an integrated crop management program that makes sense. And I think that we need to be cognizant of that fact. I think it's very important to know that agriculture is not just science. And we talked about this. It's built on decades. If you think about training an agronomist, an engineer that works in a factory, whatever they make, you have wood coming in and toilet rolls on the other side, right? And this process happens daily, weekly. And over and over, you can improve that system. But an agronomist has got 1, maybe 2 seasons a year that he can learn. And every season is different. So calculate a young agronomist at, let's make it 20, 21 years old. That's about 45 seasons effectively to learn something. So really difficult to train an agronomist because you are limited in the amount of opportunities that you have. Now times that by the different crops that you have to work with. So I think it's important that there's institutional knowledge within a community in terms of the agriculture. Let's mine that knowledge. Let's understand where it comes from. And in order to do that, and then a little word for government, if I can influence that, get the right people in the field to make those decisions and support that. And if you find the right people, they will make it happen. And spend less time in committees and good ideas. Right. Good. So back to data, because I am a scientist. I think it's important that we live in a world that unless we have the right data, good quality data, that can lead to understanding, people will make up their own minds. They will they will speculate, they'll do things like that. And I think it's important as scientists, we need to get the language right. You know, we have so much data that we confuse the hell out of people. And I think we need to get that right. So data will only be useful if you can sort it, if you can arrange it, and if you can present it visually. And that's usually where most people stop. But you've got to take that and translate that into simple, easy language for communities and farmers to understand, and something on which they can execute on. There are so many good things, good projects out there that never make it onto the farm because it sounds too complicated, right? And I think that's an important point we have to get right. So back to the integration, I think I just want to get here and maybe just share with you, I don't spend too much time, I've got 3 slides left, but I think one of those aspects that we have and that we have the ability to measure on a farm and that we can make actionable is typically weather, climate data. But you know, you'd be surprised at how limited access people have to near real-time weather stations in the country. And even the current structure of weather stations are, you know, maybe not what it should be. So I think that is a clear area in which we can collaborate. So as a business, we participated in a consortium and getting farmers to understand the vital role that climate change, understanding climate change, but to the field level, will have on your future operations. So we've started integrating some of these ideas, working and collaborating with industry in order to get the data to the farm. So just want to show you an example. So we've installed 200 weather stations in the Western Cape specifically, a project that is funded through the Eureka Intergovernmental Grant System and locally supported funding agencies, the TIA. And I think it's one of the few cases where you have a consortium. In other words, 3 partners, University of Stellenbosch, private industry through WinField United, and then an Austrian partner that manufactures the weather stations. And through this system, over the last 2 years, we've installed specific weather stations to improve the density of those stations across the Western Cape so that we can really put the climate really on top of high-definition GIS. And that system is a flagship R&D program with WineTech as well as with Ordgrow currently. And it's a system called TerraClim. And so we support that system, and I think this is an excellent example of where the likes of the CSIR, your projects, is I would literally ask you, find that industry partner, find that business partner really early on in the project, form a consortium. Nowadays with Teams and Zoom, it's so easy to interact and to collaborate. So I'm finishing with some key take-home messages. Just wanted to say that collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. It's wonderful, the word co-laboratory fits into that. So the innovation that you are doing in the laboratories and the systems and designing those processes, let's just reality check some of those by interacting with a consortium partner that can help you take that to the field. I think the decisions needs to be balanced. Farmers have a hell of a task out there. And I think it's really at the space where we cannot have our systems, our farms collapse because of what's happening in the world. So really challenging out there at the moment, and let's do some balanced decision making. And I think it must be good for the country, it must be good for the environment. That is key takeaways and finding ways, and I'm so excited to see some of the work that's being done with the biotechnology and what's it called, a bioreactor But essentially that's stuff that makes the microorganisms. So we need it, just make it cheap enough, please. And then certainly we must try and keep the farms economically viable. And I thank you.